Shall we go on to the
Baba
meat?
Yaga.
This is the big one, guys.
And,
John Wick Chapter 4.
and I wrote my letterbox review of this film with a fucking pencil.
I hope you did, because guess what, guys? John Wick Chapter 4 might be a must-see in theaters. I'm going to go out and say it. It is a great time at the cinema if you know what you're getting into. If you don't like gun violence, don't go into John Wick Chapter 4. But if you like Keanu Reeves kicking some booty, kicking some major booty, you'll love this movie.
All over a fucking puppy.
Yeah.
This may be the best in the series to date.
I think, well, I'm going to talk about that during my rankings, but I really liked this one. I think it's definitely stronger than Parabellum Chapter 3 for me.
I would say so too, even though I've enjoyed all of these films thus far.
Yeah, do you want to give like a little bit of story of what is happening in Chapter 4 for the audience?
So now John Wick is up against the High Table.
The High Table, which is the organization, like basically
of all
he used
the assassins.
Yeah, and the one he's been trying to like deal with because they don't like that he returned, right?
Yeah,
we all know that.
He still has obligations to them, some debts to collect.
But can we add Bill Skarsgård, who plays the It clown, is starring as the main High Table bad guy, right, for this film?
Who is very exaggeratedly French for some reason.
What did you think about him? Did it work for you?
He worked as an antagonist, although I think the primary rival of John Wick that still worked for me was probably Donnie Yen.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit more memorable, Donnie Yen, out of the two. But that's the thing is, Donnie Yen has that more complicated part. I think Skarsgård got dealt like the more cartoony bad guy.
Yeah, he's definitely the exaggeratedly European bad guy. Whereas, like, John Wick and Donnie Yen both have this mutual respect for each other and even participate in the same fight sequences later on.
Because I think what is a interesting parallel the movie makes is John Wick is the amalgamation of Americana action hero, right?
Yeah.
And Donnie Yen is clearly the Asian martial
artist.
artist.
The Hong Kong martial arts representative.
And and they respect each other's forms because they're different, but at the same time they do the same thing, which is to entertain mass audiences, right?
And even then they have completely different fighting styles too.
Way different fighting styles.
Both inform their characters.
Yeah, let's not say to the audience, but Donnie Yen has a very interesting part to play with his character, right? He has like a thing about him where you're like, oh, that's cool.
When he is in the fight scenes, he uses his stick to move around as a murder weapon.
Yeah, I think audiences will get a kick out of it. I do have to say, I felt at times for this one why maybe it didn't peak for me as much as the number one for my ranking list is because the fight scenes go on very long.
Yes, this film is it's 169 minutes, but at least for me, I didn't really feel it.
Yeah, I thought some of the fight scenes, especially with John Wick when he was just basically mowing down people with his gun, it kind of gets repetitive when you shoot people like multiple times. But like, if you're not going into that being aware that's going to happen, don't go into John Wick Chapter 4 is probably what I say. But yeah, I do think for me it did get strenuous at times because it is a nearly 3-hour action flick. That's not typical. When's the last time a 3-hour action flick just purely like action, not like the Batman, right?
I don't recall.
Yeah, this is one of the first.
I don't think that probably would happen had this not become such a series. And in all honesty, it's kind of a miracle John Wick even worked to begin with. Because this was almost marketed as a generic action revenge flick with Keanu Reeves past his prime at that point.
Yeah.
And it took off. It was a sleeper hit at first.
Is Keanu the credit? You think he's the main reason why this recipe is working for people?
He's certainly a draw, and Wick was something of a comeback role for him after making a few like not very successful films, and it kind of brought him back into the public eye and made him a meme.
Definitely. Do you think that what they were doing with the stakes, because they clearly upped it in this one, do you think that was working for you? Because some people could maybe argue they liked the personal touch of the first one being just about a guy who is taking revenge for his dog's death, right?
It definitely speaks to the evolution of it as a series.
Like, this one is really going for, like, this high table organization is
just
insanely intricate, right?
Yeah.
And they're all over the world. And it's a whole criminal organization that is bigger than you could even imagine, right? That's the thing I want to say is I do like that the movie knows it's very self-aware of what it is.
All the Wick films so far have been.
I think this one though leaned on the comedy the most, weirdly enough.
Yes, and that's been something I also saw in Parabellum, because in a lot of the action sequences, there's slapstick humor.
Yeah.
Essentially, because the violence gets so over the top that at some point, like, you can't help but just laugh at some of it.
Yeah.
Some of the spectacle. And the comedy doesn't usually come from the quips or the one-liners like in most action schlock.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy too. Like, Keanu has this interesting persona about him where all he has to say is, yeah. You know, he just says one word. He's like, I'm gonna need a gun. It's like... He's just like leaning into that kind of American action hero that doesn't need to do whole monologues of why I'm kicking ass. It's just I am kicking
a few
ass.
Words.
Yeah. What did you think of just Lawrence Fishburne showing up? Ian McShane has a couple bit parts to do in this, correct?
Yeah, he definitely has a somewhat bigger role than the previous ones.
I kind of enjoyed him more in this because he got more to do. And I think some of the stuff he was doing in terms of like the meatier dramatic points, it worked for me.
And we also might add, this is the final on-screen role of Lance Reddick as the concierge.
Yeah, rest in peace, Lance Reddick. He had a great time, I'm sure, filming those movies, and guess what? He's great in them. He did a good job.
And also, Clancy Brown himself, Mr. Krabs, shows up as another one of the higher-ups of the high table.
Yeah.
And he does this because he likes money.
Yeah. Can we mention, too, like, the fact that I liked how this one went international with their story, whereas I felt maybe some of the other Wicks, like, Parabellum definitely went international.
Yeah, because they go to Casablanca, and there are multiple huge set pieces there.
Yeah, I think this one, though, it's, like, a little bit more interesting, the location they go to.
Yeah, it's like they became essentially like a kind of a globetrotting James Bond, Indiana Jones style series, but with more blood.
Way more blood, way more gun violence, way more
dead dogs.
Yeah. I am actually surprised that this movie exists too, because I don't think this would have existed even 10 years ago, Connor. I think
probably not.
American movies is giving opportunities to these big budget action flicks because guess what? The turnout was great for the theater. It is bringing people in this theater.
Might I add, we saw this at the AMC in Georgetown in Dolby Cinema last night at the time of recording.
You could feel the punches.
As Nicole Kidman says, sound that I can feel.
Yeah.
This was, might I add, this is one of the most visually stunning action pictures I think I've ever seen. The same cinematographer worked on Guillermo del Toro's films. He got an Academy Award nomination for Nightmare Alley and for Shape of Water. He shot the other Wick sequels.
Wow.
They're all great looking films. Some parts of this visually and orally took my breath away.
Yeah, if you're into movies with very maximalist lighting, this is the one for you because, my God, the saturation, just crank that to an 11. But it looks good, and it kind of fits the tone of the piece, I must say. John Wick is an 11 movie.
It's pure neon noir at its finest, and some parts were just hypnotic to watch, frankly. Yeah. You could light a reefer and watch this.
Yeah, definitely.
And that also helps the action sequences because, once again, onto maximalism, there are so many very long takes for these action sequences and massive camera moves. And might I add that this film, this series in general, I think may be the top dog of modern action cinema.
Wow, that's a bold take. I'm going to still go with the Mission Impossible franchise because I'm
It's all Tom Cruise is doing all that.
Tom Cruise, one, and I like in those movies how the action sequences do vary because Tom Cruise doesn't have to rely on shooting a gun at people. John Wick does rely on having his gun and like shooting them and having a bulletproof suit in this one, correct?
Yeah, Kevlar.
Yeah.
But even then, the fact that he is joined with all these other martial artists like Donnie Yen and even Rina Sawayama, who is another highlight of the film in her debut performance, absolutely killing it in those action sequences.
You can't go into those movies saying the fighting looks bad.
No,
you cannot do that.
And there's no shaky cam. There's not much editing in these sequences. It all feels so thoroughly rehearsed in ways that haven't been seen in American cinema really at all.
I do have to say though, I did talk to a friend after the movie, and he said he could tell Keanu's not really moving the same, which could be maybe a fair criticism because Keanu is 59 years old.
Yeah, he's getting older.
Yeah.
He's pushing 60.
But for me personally, I thought he did great in the film.
He can still do it.
Yeah, I thought he was moving like pretty well for almost a 60-year-old man.
These films probably wouldn't exist without another